Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sideline Eye podcast. You're very welcome to our second episode of the year, and we're looking back at Armagh's 12-point win over Antrim in last night's McKenna Cup opener. I'm delighted to be joined once again by former Antrim goalkeeper Kerr. And Chris, I imagine this podcast probably going to be a wee bit easier for me than it is for you. It was one-sided.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably best we didn't do this last night. I was able to sleep on it a bit and get my emotions in check.
I suppose to start, before we get into the game, Chris, I just want to talk about the crowd and the Armagh supporters. 4,500 supporters in last night. The game was delayed 5 minutes to let more supporters in. Like, there's probably National League games around the country won't see that many fans for a league game. Like,
No, it was I could seen it when I landed down about 7 o'clock and was like thought it was maybe getting out of the house a bit too early as well. Like, and then once I got down, I was like, thank God I left early and in time to get there. Like, and then obviously it's hard to know in McKenna Cup as well. Like, and but we sort of touched on it the other night. You know, you could feel the excitement building in the National League matches last year, and the run Armagh went on. So there was no surprise. There was a big Armagh support. I'm not too sure many Antrim supporters were there. I know there wasn't that much to shout about, so I was I was in the minority definitely there, like, but it was good to see. Like, you know, it's not that often that you hear a McKenna Cup game delayed because of crowd coming in. Like, so long may it continue. Like, so it was good.
it's really just following on from last year, Chris, isn't it? And I know the Galway game they were beaten, but just everything that happened that day, the big wins against Tyrone, Donegal, there just seems to be such an excitement and a buzz around the county that has followed on from last year.
Yeah, and I think it's even testament as well. Like, it was, it was by no means Armagh's, strongest 15 lined out, and obviously this, you didn't know what subs were going to be on the bench, but obviously Rain's a big attraction for people to go and see, and obviously the other boys, Rory and Subi and that too, had brilliant years last year too, like, amongst others. So it was testament to the team and what they've done, and the excitement they brought around the county, like. So I'm sure they're delighted.
And getting into the game then, Chris, I suppose it's probably fair to say the game was over nearly before it started. It was Antrim just flooded back behind the ball in the first 5 minutes, and Armagh got a couple of scores. Then the goal went in, and Turbo's goal, and I suppose that was really the end of the game as a contest. You couldn't see any way back for Antrim.
No, it was really disappointing. Said before, like, I've probably been involved in Antrim squads for the last 15 years, and it was as disappointing as I've seen. I think the first 5 minutes there was no score, and you're sort of thinking, right, is this what is it going to be a dull affair and keep it tight? And I think once TK got the first point, and then, as you say, once Turbot got the goal, the floodgates opened. Then, like, there was just they were very unlucky not to maybe score a few more in the first half, and then certainly the second half as well. Goal ways, it just looked like every time they attacked, they could score a goal or open Antrim up. So from an Antrim perspective, it was very disappointing. It was a hard watch, like, to be honest, for the 70 minutes, like. But I'm sure Andy McEntee had more questions going away from it than he had answers. I know he was looking to see people in competitive games, and I'm sure he was disappointed on the showing last night.
I suppose realistically, Chris, this was a Division 1 team coming up against a Division 3 team, and when you put it out on the table like that, it's probably what we should have been expecting. But I suppose from an Armagh perspective, I'm glad seeing Armagh putting away a team the way they should, because maybe in years gone by they haven't done that.
Yeah. No, look, they play their system. They know what they're good at. They, play with width. They have runners run hard through the middle. When it's on, they'll let it off the boot. They vary their play really well. And again, we touched on it the other night. It was probably boys like, Nell Grimley, TK coming back from long-term out, between, injuries, suspension, whatever it is. And then Turbot as well, who's probably, he's used as an impact sub a lot. He'll be happy, and I know he got man of match last night. He looked sharp inside as well. Like, so there's plenty of options, and it's think going away from the game as well, you're thinking of the players that still have to come back, and who weren't even named as subs. So I think Cavan will put up obviously it'll be a tougher game just with the physicality and the size of Cavan in general as a team. They're probably pound for pound the biggest team that I've seen in person as well. Like, so they'll bring a different prospect down at Armagh.
I thought the biggest difference, while the game was still a contest in the first period or the first quarter, Chris, I thought the biggest difference was Armagh's pace and their defence. Like, both teams were getting 14, 15 men behind the ball, but when Armagh they were getting physical, turned the ball over, and it was the pace they broke at, while Antrim just didn't seem to have that. And again, you're maybe going to that, a team playing at Division 1 level and a team playing at Division 3.
Yeah. And then as well, I mean, Antrim played into the breeze in the first half, and Armagh just were able to camp in the Antrim half. Ethan was the last man back, and he was standing on the halfway line. So it's like they just put the gun to the head and just wanted to smother Armagh or Antrim's kick out and put as much pressure on them from the off, and they done that. Like.
And you mentioned Connor Turbot there, Chris. He got man of the match, but I think there was 30 players from Armagh that played last night, so it was nobody played the full game, so it was always difficult to get maybe a man of a match. But Turbo for the half hour or the one half he was there, he was really impressive. And as you were saying, he's been about a couple of years, but he's still trying to break into this team. He still maybe feels that he has a point to prove, and he still has to put in big performances.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're the matches you want to go out. Say he's been there a couple of years. He was brilliant on Clanarn's run, their championship win last year. He's sharp from dead ball and in play, like, and he's a handful for any defender, like. So he showed last night what he's capable of, and I'm sure it's done his confidence the world of good as well going into the next game.
And I suppose Antrim's 2 goals, Chris, came after half time, came in the second half, and while they didn't change the game or they weren't going to get Antrim back into it, it probably just took a bit of bad luck off the scoreline more than anything. And Owen Eastwood, he got 2 of them, and probably for Andy McEntee, that's a positive that he come off the bench to get 2 goals.
Yeah, I mean, they were both against the run of play, sort of deflections. One come off the crossbar and straight into Oren's lap, and he's not going to miss that far out. And I suppose at that stage, which I probably just haven't played and stuff, I think the making 12 subs at half time, I mean, that's just, I would have seen that as the biggest disrespect, playing against the team that can do that. And what do you call it? What they were able to do, by bringing 12 players off the bench. It was probably a disheartening thing. It was a completely different Armagh team than the first half. So it's hard to judge it as well, but I suppose if the goal chances are there and you're that close in, they should be taken. Like, but it was probably just a disappointing night all in all from an Antrim point of view. Like, and hopefully it can't get any worse, and have another game this week, obviously, at home to try and salvage a better performance heading into the league.
That's against Cavan, Chris, and obviously that's a Division 3 team, and arguably Cavan aren't a Division 3 team, but they're there. That's the level they're at. You would imagine Antrim would have been happier playing Cavan first rather than Armagh.
It's hard to know. Like, I mean, as we were saying the other night, it's hard to know what way teams are going to be lined out and who's going to come in for them. Last night Armagh went strong. It was a strong Armagh side. Never mind the boys that were missing and have to come in. Antrim probably wanted it's hard to know, as I say. Like, it can't get any worse. You're only going to get better after that last night, and maybe it was a good marker of where the squad is and what's needed going forward. So they'll need a better performance against Cavan, and as I say, they're probably not a Division 3 team, and they'll be one of the favourites to go up into Division 2. So again, it'll be a good test against them heading into the league.
And of them 12 subs that come on at half time, as a journalist, from a journalist point of view, it's a disaster trying to catch up on them all and see who's off and see who's on and write it all down and keep following the play and see who scores and all as well. But There was 7 debutants last night. I think Shane McPartlin was the only starter, and then 6 from the subs. There was a few, the likes of Joe Sheridan, Niall Smith, Peter McGree, and all come on for their second game. They'd made their debuts last year in the McKenna Cup. So it's bleeding in fresh blood, and we expected that, Chris. And obviously, we spoke about Cian McConville and Shane McPartland were the two that we wanted to see. And I suppose they're the two that maybe come away standing out, and Joe Sheridan obviously grabbing 1-1. But just getting them boys game time, getting them into a game that was comfortable at that stage for Armagh, it's a good stepping stone for them, and maybe they'll see more game time next Wednesday against Calvin, and it'll be a wee bit more competitive for them.
Yeah, it looked like everyone was getting at least 35 minutes last night from an Armagh perspective. So obviously, depending on what training load and all they have at the minute, and what they're getting put through away from the games. I know that they're not out; they have another week then to play, Kevin. So yeah, them boys will just want to pick up again. Cian come on and then went off again, so I'm not sure if he picked up or not. But I thought Shane done well last night. He didn't look out of place for his debut. And yeah, with Rory not playing last night. He's another option for a left-footed free taker as well. Both off the ground and out of his hands. So thought he done well. Thought Barry McCambridge was excellent at centre half back. It was just he'd be an absolute nightmare to be getting picked up by, because he's just constantly on the move and driving forward. And thought he done very well. Along with Niall Grimley, it was good to see him back after obviously such a bad injury last year, and he got through it okay. So no, Armagh. It's hard to know Armagh if they got much out of it, as a team. But I suppose you can only put up the score against the team that's in front of you, and it's a competitive game. It's January, and I'm sure they'll not be reading too much into it either.
I think that's the thing. You don't really know where Armagh are at properly, and they'll hopefully get a few more tougher and competitive games before the start of the league, before the Monaghan game at the end of January. But Cian McConville, Chris, we've been waiting on him to come onto the scene. He got about 20 minutes last night, and he was probably the best player on show for those 20 minutes. He got 3 really good points, was showing for the ball well. We know all about his pace, his accuracy that he showed at club level. I suppose as Armagh fans coming away from the game, it was disappointing. He did get a slight knock, but I think it was more precaution taking him off than anything. It's nothing serious, but just seeing him kicking points and playing so well for Armagh for the short time he was on, it was great to see.
Yeah, no, listen, he's a serious operator. Been more than impressed with him any of the times I've seen him. So he's sharp in front of goal. And you say 3 points in a 20-minute spell. Thought him and Justy when he came on as well, just electric pace. And there's one thing that defenders don't like is his pace, and people run at them and taking them on. So Armagh can add them boys into already the potent forward line that they have, then it can only be a good thing going forward. And if they get more minutes next week, then it'll set them in good stead. They might act if they qualify for the next round of the McKenna Cup as well and get another game, then it's only a good thing for the squad that's they're getting exposed at that level.
I think their forward line, Chris, it's so good, and we probably talk about it too much on the podcast, but for the boys that played last night, the likes of Cian coming in, Justy, Shane McPartland hoping to break in, you had Jason Duffy missing, Ryan O'Neill missing, Rory Grugan missing, so there's so much competition for places all around the team, but especially in the forward line.
Yeah, that front eight, it just would be a nightmare to pick, as a manager. I suppose it's good to have those options too. And Subi as well came off the bench as well, who didn't start. So there's plenty of options there, and it's a forward line that you wouldn't fancy facing week in, week out.
And in terms of that Calvin game next week, Chris, Armagh more or less should make the semi-final now. It would take, unless Calvin beat Antrim and Armagh by more than Armagh beat Antrim, and the mathematics and all that comes with it. But at least a second place, you would imagine, if Armagh don't win the group. But they should get a semi-final spot, and you'd be expecting a bigger game and a bigger test next Wednesday evening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said before, Cavan bring huge physicality to the game, just their sheer size, their running power. They'll Ulster champions maybe 2 years ago, so they're a really good side, really well conditioned, and they'll put up a stronger. It'll be a tougher game for Armagh next week as well for it's as tough for Antrim on Sunday again. So yeah, like it's only a good thing for the Armagh management to see these boys being exposed against top teams to get through the semi final. You get a Tyrone, a Monaghan, whoever it may be. It's good to get those players to see if they can. They're up to it at that level, and that's what the McKenna Cup's for, really.
And I think we spoke last week that we didn't really know, like certainly older players, we didn't really know how they would take them McKenna Cup, but just got the feeling last night. I'm not saying Armagh are going gung ho to win it, but they're going to try to win every game. Well, in years gone by, that maybe wasn't the case. But as you said, to get them bigger games, to get the semi final, a final, playing better opposition, that it can only help the team and this team that's trying to develop new players.
Yeah, I mean, like the habit of winnings, it's hard to create. There's silverware. Whether doesn't matter how people view this competition. It's a piece of silverware to be. You want to try and win as much as you can. And if you get a bit of silverware at the end of this competition, brilliant. It's not to be all and end all. I'm sure the Armagh management and players know that as well. But if they want to keep playing competitive games against county teams, it beats training, it beats in-house games, and it throws up different propositions each week that you'll face further down the line in the National League and in the Championship League. So it's only a good thing.
Yeah, so it's Calvin up next. That's Wednesday evening. Calvin play Antrim on Sunday afternoon. So the next week's game with Calvin will most likely determine who tops the group and goes through to the semi-finals. And of course, there's the best second place as well that goes through to the last four. Of course, we'll be covering that game as usual with our preview podcast coming out next week. We'll have our previews, our match reports, all our usual articles. So make sure to follow us on all our social media pages. We're on Facebook, Instagram, on Twitter. Like us on Spotify if that's where you listen to your podcast, and the same as YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube page. Chris, brilliant hearing from you the last two nights. I really appreciate it. I know today was maybe a wee bit tougher than it was the other night, but great to hear from you. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, no worries, Sean. Thank you.